my perception on Trump, uh, I'm not claiming that Trump is perfect or that I agree with everything he does or everything he says. Uh, I would say though that I have a rather positive look on his actions. Um, so the reason I say that we should elect him or that he should be elected is because I'm just considering what's gonna end up happening in November, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, in November, we're gonna have a face-off between Trump and Bernie Sanders, and I think a lot of what Bernie Sanders wants to do is dangerous for the USA. And even though Trump is not perfect or sometimes does pretty terrible mistakes, I feel like overall he's a pretty good president, and so I would rather have him make some mistakes than Bernie Sanders coming um, to create chaos. Okay, so some of the things I don't agree with Trump, I would say his climate change views. He denies climate change or global warming. I would say that's pretty bad. He even made some actions that sort of pull back the effort of the US to participate in the war against climate change. I would say sometimes he is a little bit too brutal with his words, and also he sometimes he feels like he's a bit childish. About Bernie Sanders, I feel like be it the healthcare for all, student for all, marijuana for all. I mean, and just like a lot of his, I love what he wants to do. I feel like there's a lot of problems with a bunch of them. So that's why, considering that they're gonna face off in November, I would rather, if I was American, elect Trump as a president than Bernie Sanders. That'll be it for my introductory statement.
Okay. Thank you, Mela. Also, thank you for showing up today. I'm really excited to have this debate, and thank you all for being here to hear it. By the way, I'm getting feedback from somebody. Mela, is that you?
I'll mute myself.
Thank you. Yeah, if you don't mind, just while I'm talking, so I don't have to hear myself, because that's awful. I feel bad for you guys. Okay. I contend that Donald Trump is bad for the United States and bad for the world, and therefore should not be reelected in 2020. Despite claims that he has improved the economy, there is no evidence that it is doing much better than it would have if it continued on as it did under Obama in the trend set by his second term. Worst of all, Trump did not keep his promise to the American people when he said that he would put $4,000 in tax returns in their pockets or grow the economy from 4 to 6%. A recent Pew poll of 32 countries shows that 64% of their populations do not trust Donald Trump to make good decisions, and only 29% express confidence in his international policies. Trump forms and publicizes his relationships with leaders like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, tyrannical leaders with authoritarian regimes, while neglecting and undermining relationships with well-established allies in Canada, Mexico, and Europe. An example of his behavior being the G20 summit, where he offended and baffled a great number of our European allies. He has not looked good on the world stage, no matter what fans of his think about his potential as a strongman presence. Indeed, that presence has looked good mainly to other strongmen and those who feel they need to be protected by strongmen. While we are in a sad state of affairs where we expect to be lied to by politicians, Trump is arguably the most prolific liar with a political platform, repeating lies up to 88 times, hoping that they will stick, as he did when he claimed the Ukrainian whistleblower recounted his call with Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky completely inaccurately. The truth of the matter is that the whistleblower got the call almost exactly right. But how many Trump fans will know this fact, as the more times you repeat a lie, the more likely it will be believed. He recently said that the noise from windmills gives you cancer, and repeated for the 5th time or so that his American-born father was actually born in Germany. He lies so much and so often that people have to update exhaustive lists just to keep up. And because he has said that the media is fake and that journalists are the enemy of the American people, Trump fans do not believe the lists published of his lies, and they don't believe that he lies much at all. He is gaslighting this country by shielding his supporters from the truth and instead inviting them to the alleged truth directly to their phone from his campaign, which is basically state news. And his non-supporters are also made to feel crazy when they try to show their friends and family the truth, only to have their legitimate source, reports published by journals with excellent standards and practices, be rejected and called fake news. The psychological, physiological, and cultural effects may be felt for decades after Trump leaves office. Another 4 years of this could actually damage the health of Americans by adding further stress to their hearts and minds. Almost any Republican could beat Trump on this measure. Americans would feel safer under their leadership. Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord at a time when it is absolutely critical that the United States needs to be active in finding real solutions to climate change and the effects of global warming. It was under this administration that we experienced the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, and as of right now, he has reduced spending in government agencies like the CDC, the National Security Council, the Department of Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services to the level that some of them are almost non-functioning. This goes beyond good budgeting into what could be sociopathic destruction. For example, if the coronavirus became a big problem in the United States, we would be ill-equipped to handle it. The consequences of his actions are going to be felt more so in his second term than what we've been able to see so far, because he's only been president for 1 term. Anyone currently running in 2020 will be a better president than Trump. Please do not vote for him. Thank you for your time.
A very good introduction. So you think Bernie Sanders is better?
Sorry about that. But we're not arguing on the topic of Bernie Sanders, right? You agreed to, the topic is Donald Trump should be reelected 2020.
Yeah.
And we don't have a current Democratic nominee, even though it looks like Bernie Sanders may be the nominee. There's no way of telling if he will be.
Okay. But, a president can be viewed on who he is, his positive, his negatives, his pros, his cons, but he also has to be seen in relationships to the others. So for example, let's say I go in a shop and I have only one product to select, then I have no choice. But if I go in a shop and I can compare well, maybe what I'll choose it will be the best, even though it has some negatives.
Well, like I said in my opening statement, I think literally any candidate that's running right now will be a better president than President Trump.
So, for example, Bloomberg would be better.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think Bloomberg will be better. For example, he has had a very aggressive way of handling his subordinates. He has put a number of women under a non-disclosure agreement. Some of them say, yeah, that he harassed them, or even maybe sexually harassed them. He he doesn't fear spending his money like crazy to buy the election. Instead of communicating with the people, he just spends his money to use aggressive ad campaigns against the people. So yeah, like for example, I don't think Bloomberg would be better than Trump.
I mean, I think it's a little weird bringing up like non-disclosures and sexual harassment of women, and compared to Trump. Like he's done the exact same thing. Because Trump also has sexually harassed women and has them under non-disclosure agreements. But I mean, I agree. I'd rather not have another like sexual abuser in office. That would be preferable.
Right. What about buying the tendency of Mike Bloomberg? Like he's already spent almost $1 billion in the election.
Well, how much did Trump spend? Because the thing that we're doing right now, the reason that I don't like this whole pick a candidate so we can compare is because we're talking about whether or not we should reelect Trump, and I feel like you're doing a whataboutism. I feel like you're pulling me into a lot of whataboutisms. And while I do agree that it's good to compare people, I feel like that's not what's happening right now. I feel like you're bringing up what about this thing? What about this thing? And what about this? Like, I think we should stick talking about Trump.
But see, that's exactly what I said. We're not running a perfection challenge here. We're not comparing Trump to perfection. We're comparing Trump to the other candidates to make sure that he's the best out of the bunch, right? That's what makes sense. Running him against a total perfection metric, in my opinion, doesn't make sense. That's what doesn't make sense. In my opinion, comparing him to the options we got, almost like a pragmatic approach is, in my opinion, the best way to determine if he's the best or not.
All right. So I guess this isn't what I signed up for, but if you want to have a Bernie Sanders versus Trump debate, we can do that. But I just want to be clear, that's not what I signed up for. We were supposed to talk about whether or not Trump would be a good candidate. Based on his, I thought that would be based on his performance.
Well, it's also based on his performance, but the real topic here is should he be elected? And I think that's the real question. And I mean, I'd be glad to compare Trump and Sanders, but just a minute ago I brought Bloomberg in the equation, so I'm also open to talk about all candidates. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
I would have if you want to compare, for example,
guys.
okay. Yeah, like if we want to like talk about Trump, like to me, saying like every human has made mistakes in his life. You know, every human has had moments of confusion, had things go his way, things not go his way, right? We all have our daily challenges, and we try to be better. Trump will never be perfect. The interesting thing is he better than the other candidates? Like, for example, let's talk about Bernie Sanders. Like, if I go on the official website of Bernie Sanders, um, I can read just a second. I mean, basically, first of all, he wants to legalize marijuana in the United States. Well, I'm actually against it because that goes back to my point about the military. The military right now has problems finding people, like finding people that meet their criteria to hire them for the military. So there's a lot of problems. The first problem is the obesity problem. There's also some kind of like body type requirements, but there also is a marijuana requirement, right? Where if you smoke, you cannot go into the military, right? And if we legalize, marijuana and make it go all good and all that, then what's going to happen is that, the number of recruits, people are going to be able, like the military is going to be able to have, is going to be lower and lower, right? And so that means two things. One, the military is going to run out of recruits, which is absolutely bad for the US, or it's going to have worse and worse recruits because they're going to have to lower their standards, and that's bad too. So I don't think, for example, that's a good, and that's not just Bernie Sanders. Other candidates have talked about legalizing marijuana.
All right. Well, with regarding marijuana, I'm not sure that there's evidence to prove that if somebody uses marijuana occasionally, just as they might have a couple of beers after they are training, is going to make them an inefficient soldier, for one thing. And for another thing, I mean, if we're going to go off of the argument that we're having a hard time finding recruits, I mean, right now we're having a hard time finding recruits because they can't find enough people who aren't obese. So by that logic, we might, want to we might want to make cheeseburgers illegal, or like sodas, like have higher soda taxes. I don't know if I would go down that path of choosing to make something legal or illegal based on like military recruiting.
I think your example of banning cheeseburgers is completely like, it doesn't really make sense, because marijuana is like, for example, marijuana is not just like a subjective view or like some sort of like hidden discrimination where they don't hire people who they know smoke marijuana. It's actually a set criteria that they have to respect. It's not just like a matter of opinion, right? For the cheeseburger thing, you were talking about banning cheeseburger, where obesity is a much larger problem than just banning cheeseburgers. So, I don't think your example is really a good example, because in the case of marijuana, that is the only thing that matters, whereas in obesity, it's a complex problem. Banning cheeseburger is almost like treating a problem by closing your eyes and banning like someone that has a bad rep, you know.
Well, what I'm trying to point out is that you're kind of, almost creating a problem where there might not be one, and that, maybe people could smoke marijuana recreationally like they drink recreationally, as long as they don't have a problem, right? And it would be just fine. Whereas, like, you're kind of ignoring a bigger problem of obesity. And even though it's complex, that doesn't mean it should be solved, or it shouldn't be solved. And yeah, of course, banning cheeseburgers is a ridiculous answer to that. I was kind of memeing a little bit there, And anyway, I'm not sure that I follow your logic that we shouldn't legalize marijuana because of military recruiting. Like, I don't think that that's a good reason.
Yeah, banning marijuana, like the military recruiting, is only one of the arguments. The other arguments is the proven effects on the brain of adolescents and children. So if we legalize marijuana, it's going to give more access to those drugs, and we know those drugs are very popular amongst that demographic. So if we legalize them, then it's going to create an even bigger problem in America.
Well, I think there's something to that, but I think you could say the same for alcohol as well. And prohibition has never gone over well in this country. And I think that it just leads to more problems, like jamming up our prisons with non-violent offenders. And that's just, to me, costing the American taxpayer more money and getting more of them into situations where it's harder for them to get jobs and be successful, all because they smoked a plant. So yeah, there are definitely negative effects on the brain for, adolescents and young people and possibly mentally ill people. All of those things, it looks like in some studies that has been the case, although, with the correlation and causation thing with mentally ill people, that's a little bit unclear. However, that's not really a good reason to keep it illegal. I think it's just a good reason to educate people and have people watch their kids just like they do around alcohol. You don't want to let your kid drink a bunch. That's going to cause brain damage too.
Right. For the people who are in prison because of minor crimes related to marijuana, such as holding marijuana or one-time trial, then they get to prison. So agree that that should not happen. That we should criminalize drug dealers and distributors. We should not criminalize users. So that would be my opinion. So I mean, I've just started sort of my my thing about the issues of Bernie Sanders. So let's move to maybe another issue. Now, for example, we have I'm on his website, but basically it's the immigration. So he has in his issues statement said that he wanted to end all deportations until new measures were going to be put in place, or until people would. I'm going to try to search for his thing while I'm talking, but right, exactly, I found it. institute a moratorium on deportations until a thorough audit of past practices and policies is complete. So, in my opinion, that's just stupid because, someone commits an offense, someone is not wanted in the country, and now, you can't even deport him. That's absolutely bad, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow you on that. Could you kind of repeat that one more time?
Sure. So, in his issue statement on his website, he says, under all a welcoming and safe America for all, he says, institute a moratorium on deportations until a thorough audit of past practices and policies is complete. So that essentially means that if someone is bad, there's no possibility of deporting him, right? So if it's a criminal or someone we don't want in the country, he's gonna have to be, so that means more cost of holding all those people, no possibility of deport. Like, I just think it's bad.
Okay. Does it say anything about not detaining them? Because I thought it was standard practice to detain people, especially if they're known to be violent criminals.
Sure, but you're talking about even more costs.
Okay. I mean, I don't know how long this process would take, or if I don't even think he would be able to get this through the House or the Senate, but I mean, yeah, that's a fair criticism. But I do agree with him. I think that we are a little hasty with deportations right now. That all the people, there's been so many people that came here seeking asylum that that Obama and Donald Trump both said, nah, fuck you, I'm going to deport you, sent them back to their country, and they ended up getting killed just like they said they were going to. Like a lot of people from Guatemala, specifically, I think, right? I mean, so I think we should kind of look over our practices. I agree with Bernie Sanders on that. I don't know if I agree on completely holding off all deportations. You might be, I mean, you might have me on that one. I think I could agree that perhaps with like very seriously like proven criminals, violent criminals, we should be able to deport those people.
It's good that you mentioned passing the law through the Senate, because when I look at all of what he wants to do, so Medicare for all, college for all, internet, high-speed internet for all, among other things, I don't see how he's gonna make all that happen, because I mean they're all really, really controversial and strong changes, and so I don't think he also ignores the fact that it's going to be very difficult, or that there's a high chance that he's not going to be able to do all those things, but still he runs with those messages. So he's maybe honest with his ideology, but is he honest with the people when he says we're going to do that, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, when he knows the system and knows that all those things may just never happen?
I think that if you're a voting adult in the United States and you haven't figured out that politicians often talk about what they want to do and that they're not going to be able to do 90% of it, then you're just somebody that's very uneducated and probably has no business voting. I don't know, that might be a little harsh, but yeah, like everybody knows that. Everybody knows that politicians don't get most of the shit they want to get done. They try to advance their agenda as much as they can, and some of them are more effective than others. But he's saying, we're gonna do this and we're going to do that. I don't know if I would consider those promises because I'm an adult with a knowledge of all, like, lots of political administrations past, and I have a like reasonable expectations. I think if somebody told me that they thought Bernie Sanders was going to be able to do all of those things, I would tell them that they need to get a reality check.
Okay, well, then the question is, what can he do, right? Another question is, most of the media, or a lot of the media, is very taken aback by his socialist ideas, and so you see that his main are deeply, deeply controversial.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why is it that when school is funded publicly, K through 12, that's capitalism, right? Or that's fine under capitalism. We don't call that socialism, at least, right? But then as soon as we start talking about funding education beyond 12, that's socialism.
Because it just has this association. You could say the same thing about police, right? Why are we not calling that socialism? Well, because in the capitalist market, those activity, those sectors, from the age range you mentioned, they're viewed as okay, but then you actually go into higher education, and it's not okay anymore because that's just sort of how the terminology has been done. Another reason is that when you're talking about low education, maybe I could call it, then people are learning the building blocks, but then when you're actually getting a bachelor or master's degree, it's something that is much more intellectual. So the more competition you can have, the better professors, the better the diplomas or the students you can produce. And that is why having that private is often viewed as very beneficial.
No, see, I don't accept that because in the 50s and the 60s, maybe you could go get a job as a mechanic or as a clerk at a department store, or you could get a job as a secretary or a typist, right? And you could support a family. Like you could buy a house. It might be a shitty house, right? But you could still buy a house and like have a car and take care of things. And that's not the way it is now. Unless you have a college degree, you cannot do that kind of stuff. Or unless you go and get like technical training, right, and become a nurse or a mechanic, an air conditioner repair guy, all of those jobs. But that does require beyond high school education, all of those careers in some form or another, whether it's trade school, medical school, or college or graduate level study. I mean, it is necessary now to get a higher education, no matter what form it takes, if you want to be able to have to be able to take care of your family and have things like health insurance.
First of all, that's not true. There are a lot of, I think it's called boarding schools, who are just like craving for people to come. There's a lot of jobs that don't require a college degree, but other forms of education that also allow you to earn a living. Now, I will admit that a lot of jobs need a college education, but I don't see how, and in fact, I don't think it counters my argument that if you want a good college education, you need competition between the schools and the classes.
Well, the problem is, in order to get a good job where you can pay for a decent life, you have to put yourself like in serious debt or work your way slowly through school. Both of which are kind of not great options, right?
Sure, I think the price of education, is maybe a bit too high, or the fact that people get huge debts after coming out of school. I feel like that's too much. Uh, that being said, I don't think making school free for all is a solution, because then what stops the school from just telling enormous prices and just ripping off the state, right?
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think that the state would have some kind of control over that, right? I don't know, but the like taxes would probably be increased, so I'm sure people wouldn't be happy about that. But look, I guess what I'm saying is like the greater point I was trying to make before we get into the nitty-gritty of all the different little, you know, allegedly socialist policies that Bernie Sanders has is that I don't actually think he's a socialist. And I wish he wouldn't have called himself one. And I think people are really misusing the term. I think that he's a socialistic Democrat, but he still seems to be very capitalist to me. And these policies or these programs that he's talking about, to me, they fit perfectly fine under capitalism. And it's surprises me that as a European, you don't know this. I mean, all of these, like the country that you live in is an example of a country under capitalism that has a lot more socialistic programs and policies than the United States. So, I mean, you must be aware that you can still have a capitalist country and have like extended social programs, right? So I don't think we're actually talking about socialism here. And so my greater point is that these fears that people have, I think they are being drummed up by the media. Like, of course, because Bernie Sanders called himself a socialist, which I think that was a mistake. B, the media runs with it because, yeah, it does sound bad. And in a country with like the Red Scare and where the Red Scare thing still lingers and people hear the word communism and socialism and it makes them cringe, we're finally just able to get to a place where we can start having conversations about socialism and communism. And that's a very new thing. It still makes most people really uncomfortable. So of course the media is going to trounce on that and use that as a way to make money and profit themselves, right? But like if we look at popular capitalist countries with social policies, like the one you live in, it's like we're not actually, when we get down to it, talking about socialism. So those fears are unfounded and they're being mislabeled.
It's funny because you mentioned like I don't think you can really compare countries like that. I feel like you can compare countries, but it's very limited. For example, if you talk about gun control, well, in America, there's hundreds of millions of guns in the wild, and banning gun control would still leave those guns in the wild. So banning guns would maybe not be the best options, whereas in another country it would have worked. So it's not because another country has been able to implement those things that America can't. Second of all, a lot of the countries that you see with sort of very good social
Wait, hold on, because you just strawmanned me. That's not what I said. I was saying.
Let me finish.
No, but I do need to call out the fallacy because you did just strawman me. That is not what I said. All right, go ahead.
Second of all, if you actually look at the people who have those social programs or those social welfare, laws, well, those countries are very small. If you look at Sweden, if you look at Switzerland, as in it's my case, they're very small. So it may work for us with our size, but America is a big country. There's a lot of people, and so it's not because it worked here that it works in America. So I think comparing my your country is a good thing. Second of all those programs, all those ideas, Bernie Sanders, how is he going to finance them? He's going to finance them by taxing the rich. He's talked about taxing billionaires, right? But that's just an obvious problem. Billionaires are always trying to evade taxes. You can just look at tendency of them that put their headquarters in other countries to avoid taxes, right? They've always done this. They're always going to do this. And if you treat them in a bad way or in a way that is too harsh, such as is the way that Bernie Sanders wants to do it, they're just going to evade, and it's going to fall back on the middle. So, it's good to have ideals, but I think he doesn't realize that his plan is going to just crash because billionaires are going to leave, and then there's going to
Okay, so first of all, what I was making a point about was how the media was misapplying the term. And also Bernie Sanders, I think, is misapplying the term. It's not actually socialism. I wasn't trying to compare our country and say it's going to work here because it worked in Norway and Finland and Sweden and Switzerland. I'm not saying that. However, I do think that those are good governments to look to as places where extended social programs have happened under capitalism and have improved things. Does that mean it's going to work the same here that it did there? No, of course not. And yeah, we have a much bigger population, way spread out, like over a much bigger piece of land. So things are going to be very different. We also have a different history. We're just a different country. We have a very different population. There's no denying that, that it's not going to be the same. All we can do is kind of see how these programs, if we decide democratically that we want them, which I think that we should at least have Medicare for all. We need to look at other countries and see where they've gone right and see where they've gone wrong while we're formulating our plan in our country. That doesn't mean we make it the same, right? And that's not at all what I was saying. So that's a straw man fallacy, right? When you build up somebody's argument to look like a different argument than the one that they're making. What I was talking about had nothing to do with that. What I was talking about had everything to do with the word socialism and how it's being misapplied to this situation. Okay, and then second of all, Bernie plans to tax it's not just billionaires, right? He plans to impose a Wall Street speculation tax that will raise 2.4 trillion over 10 years. That tax would be a 0.5% tax on stock trades, a 0.1% on bond trades, and a 0.005% fee on derivative trades. And yeah, of course, billionaires are going to try to get out of it, but something that's written into the legislation before they pass it would be that this is a non-negotiable tax. This would be how the program is paid for. And these kinds of stipulations and taxes are levied on a regular basis, and that's how we pay for programs, is through different kinds of taxes. So it wouldn't be able to be something that they would be able to just wiggle out of. Maybe later when it came to maintaining the program or reinstating the program, yeah, Like that's a possibility, but that's why we need to make sure that it works well and that everybody likes it, so that it's working for everybody, that it's serving its purpose, and that people are getting the healthcare that they need in a way that is not stripping everybody's pockets. And that will, I think, alone should ensure the success of the program.
Okay, I'll send an article in debate chat. So it's going to be about physicians that want to avoid taxes and how left their jobs as a consequence of it. And now patients have no surgeons or no medical services because of taxes. So you're going to be able to see. Right. So in the article, it explains that the British Medical Association has warned that growing numbers of GPs and consultants are taking early retirement or cutting back on work to avoid hefty pension taxes, which make it uneconomic to continue practicing. As you can see, making bad taxes can create real problems. And to let's just apply common sense here. Like, it's not just medical care for all; it's also education for all. The U.S. has a big debt, so where is the money going to come? Is it going to create more debt, or is it going to come from taxation? And the reality is, if it comes from taxation, it's with those huge sums of money that need to be taxed, it's just going to create problems.
I understand that there's going to be a problem, like that there has been major problems in socialized medicine in other countries, like in Canada and the United Kingdom. And I think that we're going to have problems with ours as well. And it's going to be probably a bit of a rocky start, I'm assuming. But I think the goal is, in the end, is that there's nobody that when they're sick or dying, that they can't get the care that they need, right? That's the idea. I think of it as like a human right, sort of, because I've seen far too many people die and be sick without any health care. So I just think that's a really important thing to try to achieve. Just because something has been hard to achieve or has had problems doesn't mean it isn't worth pursuing. Mance, can you mute yourself? Also, I told you how Bernie said he was going to pay for at least Medicare for all, right? A tax on Wall Street, a Wall Street speculation tax that will raise $4 trillion over 10 years. And it might just be Medicare for all, I mean, if we're lucky. I don't even know if he'll be able to pass that. That would be like, if we're lucky. What are the chances? Because you said, oh, it's not just Medicare for all, it's also free education for all. Like, what are the chances that Bernie Sanders, if he becomes president, I hope he can do it, but I find it to be highly implausible that he'll be able to pass both Medicare for all and get free higher education for everybody. I would sooner bet on my ass growing wings and me flying out to the moon.
Right. So then, what is he running on? Right. Has he nothing that he can do? Can he do anything? Like, also for Medicare for all, I'm gonna link an article that is that talks about um, Venezuela, because Venezuela has healthcare for all, and what that article says is that essentially, when they implemented healthcare for all, everything went well, but then the tide turned, as the article says. The largest oil reserves in the world could not stave off economic collapse as lower demands for oil, excessive government spending, U.S. sanctions, and price control led to rocketing inflation and falling gross domestic products. The impact on the healthcare system was exacerbated by exchange rate controls, which led to a surge of the foreign currency needed to import equipment, food, and medicine. Later in the article, you can say healthcare outcomes have continued to deteriorate rapidly, right? So once again, when the economic stability or when the money leaves, healthcare for all creates a huge crisis in the healthcare system. Now, you might say, yeah, but America can afford it. For how long? Um, you know, is the tax going to be enough? Who knows? Now America is doing fine, but is doing fine after coming back from a pretty hard period. New jobs have been created, and I feel like America is on a good track to be, very rich again. But it's not the time to impose too strict, um, sort of programs that just all those programs. You mentioned that you think that someone who is dying or needs care should be able to get it, as a human right. Well, I believe in a human right, and I would say it's great if people who need care could get it. But at some point, you have to think about, you know, um, balancing idealism. And I'm not saying you're idealizing, but I feel like, um, having everybody get care is an ideal, and you have to balance that with, economic realities.
I think that in the United States of America, where we're the wealthiest country in the nation, it's very practical to want to pay for things like a national healthcare system and higher education. I don't think there's any reason we shouldn't be pursuing paying for those things by taxing Wall Street and taxing billionaires and taxing people that probably should be taxed more. Like, not the middle class, though, because the middle class is still suffering, even under this presidency, and our economic divide is greater than ever. So we need something to be done to help kind of bring the divide back down and boost the middle class. And I think the best way to do that is through these social programs, because we'll be getting people back into stable lifetime work where they're getting the benefits they need and they're able to take care of their families like they were in the 50s and 60s. And they'll have health care so they don't get sick and they can continue to work. And if they're disabled, their disability will be less likely to get worse and they'll be able to keep working. In fact, I think that this will be very pro-worker and will keep people working for as long as they possibly can. I think it'll be like a huge benefit to everybody. Well worth the taxes.
You say you don't see any reason at all why America couldn't afford it, or that America was rich. First of all, I already pointed out America, though it's coming back right now, had a very huge crisis in 2008, had a very huge loss of jobs. I also pointed out that billionaires would likely evade taxes or just not pay them at all. I've pointed out that this is, a recurring theme. I've linked an article about the medical people who left their jobs or stopped providing services in the UK because of taxes. Then, you said that it would be a great thing to bring back the families into a better situation, a more stable situation. But if the billionaires don't pay, then it's going to fall back on the middle class, right? And so that's not going to help them.
If the tax levy is written into the legislation, the billionaires can't just be like the Wall Street people can't just be like, no, that tax is compulsory.
Look, they have been evading tax for years, and those taxes were also written in the law. So I don't see how the fact that it's written in the law makes it any stronger than what was done before.
Like, you're conflating them having, to pay their personal taxes by having offshore accounts, like inheritance taxes and things like that. But we're talking about Wall Street. We're not talking about taxing individual billionaires. We're talking about like taxing in a different way. So probably, I'm guessing Wall Street I don't know, a 0.1% on bond trades and a 0.005% fee on derivative trades. So every time somebody makes a trade, there's an automatic tax built into the cost of it. That's not something you can really wiggle your way out of by having an offshore account,
Sure, but then you're not mentioning all the other taxes that were mentioned. So if you just mentioned that, then yes, I feel like that's possible, but I don't think it's enough to pay for all expense.
Like maybe, I mean, it's projected to do it's projected to raise $2.4 trillion over 10 years. I mean, there's different ideas he has on taxation that we could look at, but I feel like this has become less of a should Trump be the president in 2020 debate and more of a why shouldn't Bernie Sanders be, when again, we don't even know that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee. I mean, the polls just closed in South Carolina. So I guess we'll kind of find out soon enough if he's more likely to be the nominee. But here we are already assuming one thing, that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee. And I've let you lead me around by the nose for the last hour, defending Bernie Sanders when he's not even the nominee. And I think it's just really, it's starting to become kind of frustrating. I mean, I know we can be comparing these nominees, but I still maintain that Donald Trump is such a bad, at least Bernie Sanders, right, isn't going to be taunting people with nuclear weapons by calling them fat on Twitter. At least he isn't going to be ruining our allyship, with Germany and France and Canada and Mexico. And Canada are those important. We share borders with them. And Trump is ruining our relationship.
You're cutting out, sorry.
Okay, I need to put my headphones on. Hold on. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. You talked about why I talk about Bernie Sanders. Well, I would say that it's true that he's not the nominee for the Democratic Party. I would say that is correct, and that is something that is very important for this debate. I feel like, because if he is not the nominee, then maybe another candidate has a choice to rise. But he's leading in the polls, so I feel like it was a good topic to talk about.
All right. Well, I mean, and I just like to continue for one moment on the train of thought I was having a little bit ago, because I do want to talk a little bit more about Donald Trump, because I like, if you want to assume it's Bernie Sanders, but I think any Democratic nominee would do just fine. Like, they're going to be able, they can speak, more than 3 sentences coherently. They're not ruining our alliances in Europe and with our 2 closest countries that we share borders with. They're not lying to people. I mean, they do lie. They're politicians, but like, the amount of lies are not so extreme. They're not saying things like the noise from windmills can give you cancer, and telling everybody that their dad was born in Germany when they were born in the United States. Like, just lies that they don't even need to tell, but just because they're so compulsory, right? And they're not going to like make everybody feel terrified because they're so incompetent in just their basic memory recall skills. And they're not going to have everybody sitting there second guessing whether they're like just evil or stupid, and trying to decide which one they should be more afraid of when they're thinking about how much power he has and the fact that he could make a decision to nuke another country if he wanted to. Like, all of these things, literally any nominee, including Republicans, would be better than that.
As I stated in my introductory statement, I will agree that sometimes Donald Trump makes childish mistakes. Now, you said any Democratic candidate would be better option. Well, for example, Joe Biden, is I feel like very confused. The other day, that was 4 days ago, he said he's running for the Senate, or another day where he says that he was in one state while being in another state. There are also a lot of people that have seen him just be out of shape, sort of looking weird. Some people say he has dementia, right? So, like, for example, he's not better. We've talked about Bloomberg. I don't think he's better. I think he is a bad person. I feel like he's trying to take advantage of the weakness that the people have, in front of the media. Now, maybe we can talk about, the other, options. But I feel like the claim that anything would be better in the Democratic lineup than Trump, I think that that's absolutely false.
Yeah, I just don't think we're going to agree.
Yeah, but like, I mean, if we agree, that's great. Now I'm just discussing the possibilities. I'm discussing the candidates. If you think, for example, there's someone other than Bernie Sanders that would be a good option against Trump, or would have a good chance of being the nominee, feel free to mention him or her.
I mean, I don't know where. I'm not talking about who's most likely to win the election. if you were to ask me which one I think would be a better president, any of them. Because I think that they would not just be more professional.
You're cutting out again.
Like I said, I don't know who would be. I mean, the question here isn't who would be most likely to win, right? But who would be a better president? Literally any of them.
What about the fact that Bloomberg is trying to win the election just by running ads, and that anytime he's, in a debate, we end up discovering disgusting things about him, and he doesn't even cover up, but tries to divert the attention in an obvious and sort of manipulative manner. And I've actually talked about, the fact that Joe Biden doesn't seem to have his head on his shoulders. So I feel like your claim is wrong.
I do think that Joe Biden is a little he does kind of ramble and misspeak a lot, but I don't think it's measurably worse. I think it's actually a lot better than Donald Trump. Maybe you could compare them. I don't know, but he definitely, to me, sounds a lot more coherent than Donald Trump. I can actually kind of understand what he's saying most of the time. And as far as hilarious clips of him ranting, there are way less than Donald Trump. I mean, the only one I've seen that's compared to Donald Trump's rant about Elton John's albums was Biden's rant about his leg hair, in the pool and kids stroking his leg hair. That was really weird and creepy. There's so much footage of Donald Trump being a huge space, not making any sense, and his words don't make any sense. Or where he seemed like he wasn't doing that well mentally or physically. That's a weird thing to criticize Biden for when your guy is Trump.
I mean, we can get into the complexities of that. Like, Trump is childish, but I don't think he's out of it. Let me read you some examples of what Biden. So I'm quoting from an article. I'm going to link it in the debate chat. Just a second. And there you go. Okay, so on one occasion, Biden was campaigning in Keene, New Hampshire, but said he was in Vermont. What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it, and what a neat. On another occasion, he says, "There's the Dreamers program. There's also a program that said we're not going to separate families. We're going to allow families to stay together while they go through the process. We did that in 1976." He said, and then later he said, and I mean, I'm sorry, excuse me, backing up there, 2014, right? He seems to really confuse who he is, confuse what he talks about. Almost like a puppet that has intent, but no real conception of what's going on. To me, it really looks like sort of the basic politician. He has, it doesn't really matter what he says as long as he gains the attention of the public. And so, then when he doesn't pay attention, because he's not really focused on what he says, well, he'll do slip ups sometimes. So I don't think he's comparable to Trump. I don't think, even though Trump is childish, he's out of it. Biden.
Okay, I feel like I'm in a weird spot because now I've got to prove it to you, and it might take me a couple of minutes, and I don't want to spend that much time having dead air, but I don't have an article in my pocket on this because I guess I should have prepared a whole section on Trump's mental fitness. I prepared for the economy, his lying, and other ridiculous things that he said. But I did not prepare on his ranting or the times that he didn't know where he was or what he was talking about. In fact, I think just the other week there was some kind of I don't even remember like what it was, but he was talking about something that happened in one state, and he kept saying it was a different state. I mean, he does those exact same things like all of the time. So I guess I have to prove that now. So I don't know if everybody's willing to give me a couple of minutes, but that's what I'm going to do.
Do you want to talk about some of the things you've prepared?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things where you campaign too. I mean, you could say this.
You're cutting out.
I don't know why I'm cutting out.
Do you want to talk about some of what you've prepared?
Yeah, sure. But like, do you see what I mean when I'm talking about how he like talks that he often misstates things as well as far as states and names and things go?
I mean, maybe he does it sometimes. I just think that Biden was too much, right? But I mean,
I could say the same thing about Trump. Like maybe Biden does it sometimes, but I think Trump is too much. Like unless we like gather all of the footage, both of them, and put them side by side, I don't think there's any way that we can seriously have a discussion about this and have one of us be objectively, provably right. So I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree.
okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, with regards to the economy, we were talking about the economy before, and a lot of people seem to be under the impression that Trump has made the economy a lot better. And while the economy is definitely still on an incline, it's not anywhere near as good as he promised it to be, and it's still following the pattern that has been happening since Obama's second term. So, while I'll give credit where credit is due, I don't think that it's anywhere near as great as people are making it out to be.
Well, as you've said it, it's better. A lot of jobs have been created. He made some tax exemption, I think, where some money would go back to the American people. Of course, as we've said with Bernie Sanders, not everything you're going to do is going to pan out, but I feel like he did a very good job.
Well, in Trump's 35 months as president, the economy added an average of 191,000 jobs per month, and the unemployment rate fell by 1.2 percentage points. And during the last 35 months of the Obama presidency, after we'd recovered some from the crash, right? New jobs averaged about 227,000 per month, and the unemployment rate dropped by 2 percentage points. So, pretty similar, right?
I would say Obama managed to get the U.S. out of the crash. After a crash, I feel like when people get back to work, you're going to have those good numbers. I feel like Trump did a good job to keep, high numbers, even though we were several years after the crash.
Right. And overall, Obama's average for the GDP growth was 2.4%, and so far Trump's average is 0.5%. So again, pretty similar. But I would like to point out that Trump promised a 4 to 6%.
As we've seen before, not everything that is promised, is done, but I feel like he did a good job.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm just saying that, if the main reason that you think Trump should be president is because of the economy, then I would say that that might be the only reason that is valid. He's kept it going on a slight upward incline, right?
Well, let me tell you, the way I view the job of a president, the first job of a president is not to fuck it up, right? And so that's the first mission. Then, if you can do something, that's really good. And I think, for example, Sanders could just fuck it up, right? So I feel like having Trump is almost like the safety choice here.
I don't think that he's the safest choice, though, because in order to keep this upward mobility, he's had to cut funding to things like the CDC, which right now we really need. Because if the coronavirus comes to the United States and it becomes a bad problem, we aren't going to be fiscally or administratively prepared to handle that. Our CDC does not have enough funding. It is not prepared.
I'm not saying he was perfect, and perhaps he should look into that.
No, he doesn't need to look into it. This is intentional. This is how this is how he's achieving small amounts of economic growth he's been able to achieve. But President Obama was able to achieve it while having these programs being really strong. don't you think that that shows kind of a weakness?
I don't think it's strong enough. I don't think the CDC or another organization is strong enough to boost the economy just by cutting a bit the budget. I feel like Obama Trump's inferiority.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a lot.
Yeah, I'm saying the impact. Although that was a mistake, the impact of cutting that, isn't enough to like explain what happened. And I feel like the fact that Obama kept those organizations well funded, is a good point for him. But I don't think that alone makes him superior or inferior.
Wait, but he had a strong social safety net and like all of these departments in the government that Trump is currently neglecting, which is the CDC, the NSC, the DHS, and the HHS. And there's probably more that I'm not even thinking of right now. But let's just start with those. If other presidents have been able to keep a strong economy and an upward mobility, right? And have everything well funded and a strong social safety net, but should Trump not be able to do that as well? Because he's not currently doing that.
Well, first of all, when you said about the CDC, for example, there's the coronavirus outbreak right now. Well, let me explain you something. The coronavirus right now is in a state of near pandemic situation. It started in China. It was supposed to be contained. It wasn't contained. Then it spread to other countries. And for those type of diseases, the CDC actually has measures that it uses to solve those issues. So, for example, one of their actions is I feel like, I could find the link. Just wait a second. But essentially, they have, they act by informing people, that, you should not do gatherings. You should wash your hands. People that are ill should be in their homes. That we should only treat critical, cases. Because the economy could be impacted by sort of like too much people in the hospitals. They have to maintain a certain calm, among other things. But mainly, the CDC in this outbreak, for example, has a lot of things planned already, and also, doesn't really need funding, but just needs to inform people of what's happening. Because it's not going to be like the majority of the coronavirus is not going to be solved through medical care. It's going to be solved through good information and good actions.
But that's not what I'm talking about. Like the problem with the CDC having short funding will be things like funding vaccine research, and then once we have vaccines, producing and spreading the vaccine through the United States. Like if it becomes an epidemic, that's what the CDC's job. Like that, they're supposed to handle things like that, right? What I'm saying is, if they're funded enough to do the job that they're doing right now, which is to tell people to wash their hands and stuff, right? Sure. But like if we actually had an epidemic, they would not be able to handle it with the way that they're funded right now.
For the vaccine, sure, but I don't believe that the U.S. is just gonna stay on their chairs and not develop. Like that's just improbable. The medical community right now is in clear need. Um, the uh, the World Health Organization is on the case, and yeah, like the fact that the CDC is not going to be able to develop a vaccine, or in a broader sense, the fact that the United States is not going to be able to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus, I don't believe that one.
Okay, would it help if I got an article?
Sure. Sure. I mean, the fact that they haven't been able to test as many cases as they wanted, is bad. But I'm pretty like Trump. Oftentimes, takes the current, and I think right now tell that he won't correct his mistakes, and I feel like he will because especially in his presidential campaign, I mean, not even for his character, he cannot afford to have this bad rep just about some stupid budget funding.
So, if by the general election he still hasn't properly funded some of these um, departments, would you still want to vote for him?
Um, I mean, like that would really shake my beliefs. That would be a really bad point. But when I like, if it's against Bernie Sanders, I feel like even with that on his resume, I would still vote. On the other side, I don't think we're getting ahead for a better future. If it's another Democratic candidate, and I feel like maybe it's a better choice, and Trump did this mistake, then maybe I would consider it.
What about the lying? Does it not bother you how much he lies, or do you just not believe it?
I mean, there are different kinds of lies. if you could like bring up specific examples, maybe we could discuss them.
Sure. Let me pull up something. Hold on. It sucks because I think that the Washington Post's list is the best, but I can't get to it right now because I'm out of clicks. But if anybody wants to look at that list, that's there. Let me find something else. All right, this one seems like it's probably a lie and not just a misstatement. He says that he was the person who saved pre-existing conditions in your healthcare. I'll pull this up for you. He attempted to take credit for one of the most popular elements of the Affordable Care Act, its protection of people who have pre-existing medical conditions. I was the person who saved pre-existing conditions in your healthcare, Trump tweeted on January 13th.
How do you link that to the Affordable Care Act?
I sent you the link. Do you not have it? I mean, the Affordable Care Act is like what gave people the protection of pre-existing conditions, and he's just kind of taking credit for it.
I mean, maybe, but he doesn't mention it in his tweets. So I'm just, like trying to make sense of like how do you make the connection? Like,
I mean,
can you not assume he was talking about something else and he was just framed?
What else gives people those protections in the United States? Can you name another piece of legislation?
I mean, no, I can't. But it doesn't mean there isn't legislation or that it was just, an action or something you did on the moment.
I mean, let's read this part. It says, under the Affordable Care Act, health insurance plans cannot charge people higher prices because they have a medical condition. This protection has been intact since the law took effect under then President Barack Obama. As a 2016 candidate, Trump promised to repeal and replace the health law. That came to a head in 2017 when the law came to it. Like, I don't know what there's not other legislation. It was an original. That was one of the cool things about the Affordable Care Act, even though there was a lot about it that was a disaster. But the Affordable Care Act, like one of the best things about it was the part that made that it protected people with pre-existing conditions, and that was completely novel. Like legislation to get passed and widely implemented. There had been versions of like legislation, in certain states passed by other people that protected certain people, like certain subgroups of people with pre-existing conditions. But nothing like that, nationwide had ever been passed before that covered people with pre-existing conditions. So I don't know what Trump could be talking about because he wasn't even doing legislation back then.
Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. If you're right, then yeah, it would be a bad point. But I mean, if all the examples you have are sort of like examples where I have to, where you have to assume knowledge, or where he doesn't make a clear mistake, it's hard to say if it was a lie or not. I mean, maybe your example is correct, but if you had like a stronger
I don't understand how this isn't a strong example of him clearly taking credit for something he didn't do, which is a lie. I mean, how is that not? Can somebody help me here? Like, how is this not a strong example?
I mean, let me explain. Like his quote doesn't talk about the Affordable Care Act. So all the interpretation of the code is made in the article. So the article could be obviously biased. But if you have like a fact where his quote speech like clearly contradicts that, then yeah, he's lying.
I feel like you're either not, like maybe I'm trying to be charitable right now. Maybe you just don't know anything about the United States healthcare system. But if like other than that, it almost feels like you're really arguing in bad faith right now. Like that's clearly a lie. There's really no way around it. But we can look at more, I guess. Hold on a moment.
I say maybe it's a lie, but to me, it's not evident enough to draw strong conclusions. Maybe it could be an element that makes us think about how he talks, and maybe leads us to a direction where we find more evidence and more convincing evidence. But I feel like as a standalone piece, it's too weak.
All right, let's take this one.
By the way, I think I'm gonna have to end the debate in 15 minutes.
Okay. Let's look at this. I thought it was a terrible thing when Nancy Pelosi ripped up the speech. First of all, it's an official document. You're not allowed. It's illegal what she did. She broke the law.
Sure, it's a lie. Can you explain to me how this lie is, a like how this has a negative effect on the country? Because like there's lies that are like serious, and then there's lies that are political. I mean, it's dirty what he did, but it's not serious.
Well, yeah, because he's accusing a political detractor, right? Somebody who he doesn't get along with, of doing something illegal like that. I mean, yeah. And like when he does it all the time, it becomes a bigger and bigger deal because he's saying things to people, like especially since he started emailing his fans and stuff, or like the MAGA people, right? and telling them to like stop watching the news and just get their news directly to their phone. Because I have a copy of that email. Like I sent one to Avit.
Would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, sure. I can share it with you. That anyway, like with the fact that he like they believe what he says, you know, and if he's lying so much, he's basically creating like a false reality for all for like all of his followers.
Yeah, like I would agree that, you know, there is an element of truth to that. You know, like as I said, I acknowledge that, you know, Trump has some bad habits or bad behavior, and I would say that, you know, you made me realize that he lies, the way he creates, as you call it, this false reality, is maybe more serious than it is, than I realized.
Yeah, and look at the so I appreciate that. This one right here with Ilhan Omar partying on 9/11, when he lies about stuff like this, right? That can be dangerous because there's already a lot of tension right now, like as far as Muslim people goes in our country. And when he's creating a narrative, when he's lying and saying that Ilhan Omar is partying on 9/11, like as though she's super happy America got terrorized, he's making Muslim Americans look bad and making racial tensions worse.
Sure, sure. You know, I will admit that he sometimes messes things up by attacking people.
Okay, and I'll DM you, or if you DM me your email, I'll email you the copy of the email that I got from the MAGA campaign.
Can you just like read a quote that you found was bad?
Yeah, sure. I just need to open it up.
By the way, I just want to point out that Ashton linked, you know, 5, 6. I mean, a lot of articles proving that Bernie Sanders also said, you know, wrong things, and I also want to say that, you know, in the recent conference that Trump held on the coronavirus, he said that he would give as much funding as needed. You know, he said that he would sign on whatever Congress came up with.
Okay, but we weren't talking like I went out of my way to find things that not just were incorrect, right? But were specifically lies, like things that it was reasonably ascertainable to see that he was saying incorrect things on purpose.
Sure, sure. I just want to, you know, take a balanced view on the situation.
All right, I had to get my other computer because the email was from like 2018, and so it was deleted from my Google. But I'll get it out just a second. Okay, it's right here. President Trump won the election by cutting through the fake news filter and going straight to you, the American people. Now he wants to be sure that you're all signed up to get real news updates straight to your phone. The more we can come bypass the fake news media, the less power they have to manipulate the news, distort our message, and unleash a flurry of attacks aimed at distracting us from our agenda. It's time to take power into our own hands. So please sign up for text today to get real news straight to your phone. Thank you, Laura Trump, Senior Advisor for Donald J. Trump.
Okay, so I would say this statement is misleading because, by reading it, you may think that all media are fake news. But I don't think it's a blatant lie, right? I feel like it's, it could be seen as misleading. But I mean,
I'm not saying this is a lie. There's like nothing to lie about. What they're doing, right, is saying like, don't listen to the news. Get news directly from the president.
Yeah, sure. Have you seen what the news came up with recently? Now they're talking about another, election influenced by Vladimir Putin. I feel like, the news, sometimes they're just garbage. They're just propaganda.
I don't like, I mean, I guess, yeah, to a certain extent, like I said in my opening statement, we have come to expect shenanigans and propaganda. But this level, to me, I mean, that it sounds like state news. Like it sounds like state sanctioned news where they're saying the other people are liars and they're the only ones with the truth. To me, that's really creepy. That's way too far. They crossed the line, and I'm like super like it's like Orwellian to me.
I mean, I think Orwellian is too far. As long as there are other sources of news, then it's not Orwellian. But like, also, I want to point out that they didn't say all news sources are wrong and we're all the only one that are true. They use a term that has a different ramification. Fake news is not only terminology, by sort of saying that all news are fake. It's sort of a catchphrase that they have been using. And so, although the phrase could have the meaning that all news are fake, it also could say just that some news are fake, but it's misleading in the sense that they use that catchphrase, but it doesn't give justice to maybe the news that are not fake.
The fake news media is pretty general, right? And I think from Trump speaking on a regular basis, we know which news he thinks is real and which news is not. But what's problematic to me about this email is that they say sign up to get real news texted straight to your phone. If any other presidential person did this, and like if Bernie Sanders did this, I would immediately like disown him and recant my support of him. I like just immediately. When I get emails from Bernie Sanders, it's like, donate. It's time to take on the billionaires. It's like, let's get Medicare for all done. That's the kind of shit he says. He doesn't say like the fake news media is lying to you. Like, so why don't you get real news straight to your phone? I just don't. I mean, maybe you don't think it's a big deal, but I'm going to disagree with you.
I mean, like, I can just quote what you just said. Like, donate. We're going to take on billionaires. We're going to get Medicare for all. Like, to me, it's like, donate. We're going to try to make something that will probably not happen, but I'll still get your money. It could be also, transformed in that way, And I feel like there is an element in that in Bernie and there is an element of sort of misleading wording in Trump's message. You know,
No, I mean, I think that Trump, like, maybe you don't see the nefariousness of it, but I think that Trump and his campaign are intentionally trying to make it seem like his campaign and like the few people that he endorses are the only legitimate source of information. So that the rest of the media is fake, right? That way he can control information that people are getting. Like, it's kind of like he's guilty of the same thing he accuses the news of being guilty of, right? But he just but people fall for it for some reason.
first of all, not everybody falls for it. Second of all, I just said that fake news is a catchphrase now, and Trump is a marketing guy. So, the way he phrases, like, first of all, can correct on intent because, he maybe isn't, he just thinks in terms of marketing and he likes to use big, catchphrases, and sometimes it's misleading. Second of all, although, it could be misleading, I don't think it's clearly stating that all news are fake. I don't think that's what is clearly and strictly stated in that statement. And third, as I said, Bernie Sanders also, in my opinion, makes misleading statement in the sense that he is saying, "Give me money, we're going to save healthcare," but in fact, it's going to be very hard. So he's letting people believe that they're going to have all this when in fact they don't, but he'll still gladly take their money.
What take I all right.
Maybe let's go to closing statement, a closing discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling worn down. I couldn't even pay attention to what you were saying there at the end. It's just gotten. Yeah, I'm just feeling worn down at this point. I don't know what else to say, and neither of us are going to concede. So let's go ahead and do our closing statements and have a vote.
Sure. Do you want to start?
No, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so I feel like for me it was a very interesting debate. I feel like Teddy did have some great points about maybe some of the shortcomings of Trump. How maybe the way he lies sometimes or misleads people and sort of leads them into only believing him, creates a false sense of or a reality where people don't look for others or don't exert critical judgment. That being said, I feel like I also made a great job of pointing out how the other candidates, I mean, we spent a great deal of time on Bernie Sanders, but I feel like I spent, some time pointing out also how the other candidates were, either weak or not sane, in my opinion, or, just sort of going for ideals when those ideals are not going to work, or if they do pass, will fail the country or destroy it. I really enjoyed this debate. I feel like I learned a lot. I hope Teddy learned a lot. I mean, he said she was worn out. I hope this exhaustion is not only comes from me. I hope I'm not that terrible of a debater. and yeah, like I hope, like I would gladly debate that subject with her again.
Thank you, Mela. No, I had a good time debating you as well. I think I'm just worn out because we've been talking about this for 2 hours. It's not because you're a bad debater, not by any means. I listen. I understand that there are things about expanding social programs in a capitalist country that can be scary and uncertain because they haven't been tried here yet. But that doesn't mean that there's not compelling evidence out there that we ought to do them, especially being that we are the wealthiest nation in the world and that every other country has been able to achieve these things. There's no reason that we shouldn't be trying to do them just because they're difficult. That doesn't mean that that's not going. I think Mela did really well to point out all of the various problems that we are going to have or could have when we, like, for example, with Medicare for all. But ultimately, sorry, I'm a little bit off track right now. But ultimately, I think that they're not going to destroy the country, and there's no evidence to suggest that. There are reasonable plans that have been laid out, and Bernie Sanders has explained how he's going to tax Wall Street to pay for these programs, and how that'll work. So I don't think it's reasonable to say that you could destroy the United States with one program like that. I don't think that's a rational fear. What I do think is a rational fear is having somebody who is clearly as incompetent, mentally unfit, and a very unstable non-genius like Donald Trump, who regularly flies off the handle, goads people, is eroding our allyship overseas, has like no decorum. And I'm not talking about civility. I'm talking about like basic discourse, like, right, for basic diplomatic discourse with other people. The economy is not nearly as great as he's taking credit for. It's just kind of doing about as well as it would have if Obama's presidency had continued. And he is such, I don't want to live in a country or live under a presidency where people are lied to so much that they become gaslit, that they literally stop being able to tell what reality is anymore. This is a huge problem. That is a real concern that we're already seeing the effects of in our everyday lives when we look at our relationships and how people are being psychologically affected. And the fact that we have two sets of valid links and two sets of facts that we are working with. Like almost like two different worlds of facts, basically. So I just don't think that the United States can handle any more of this. And I think that Donald Trump is a dangerous and terrible president, and especially comes out when we're talking about things like pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, which was probably the worst decision he's made, considering what a big and present danger global warming and climate change are. And even though Mela and I disagreed, I really enjoyed my time